Yeah,
I'm just
absolutely.
posting in the
Absolutely.
community. Okay, so today we're talking about SCM, the client settings. Just because now what we're talking about in the beginning is in your environment, you probably have, just to recap on what we've done so far. So in our environment, say this is our environment, we've got computers, devices, servers, whatever they may be that we want to manage. And we already mentioned that the whole point of SCCM is to manage the life cycle um, of a client, right from the time that you get the client and to the time that you retire the client. So every management operation that you need to perform, you need to deploy an operating system to it. You need to upgrade the operating system. You need to keep it patched. You need to deploy software updates. You need to deploy application. You need to update those applications. You need to check if the clients are compliant with your licensing agreement. You need to check if the client are compliant with your security policies. You need to check if the client are compliant with your configuration policies. So like all this stuff that have to do with client. And clients in this case, we've mentioned that it goes way beyond just clients in the traditional sense of Windows client. So clients could be servers. So managing a device, the entire life cycle of the device, SCCM can do that. So, and we already talked about uh, the foundational principle of SCCM, like sites and the different roles. And then we talked about if you want to manage this client, you need to get the SCCM client installed on them. We've talked about the different methods that you can use to install this client. We even talked about installing the client on the Mac device, and we demonstrated that and showed how that will work. So, and we'll be doing that going forward because we have a Mac device that we will be using to show how things work in SCCM in the Mac world. So you have to install the SCCM client on these devices, and then the SCCM client can now be managed by your SCCM server once you get the client installed on them. And then we mentioned last week that once you install the SCCM client in SCCM 2012, part of the client deployment actually create a scheduled task on this machine in which the client is going to evaluate his health. I think the default is set to 1 a.m. every morning. So 1 a.m. every morning, the scheduled task kicks off. The client is going to evaluate its health and report back to the SCCM server the status of its health, whether it's healthy or not healthy. And somebody said, what if the machines are off at 1 a.m. at night? So once the machine comes back on, I think there's an offset of 60 minutes. So once the machine comes back on, after 60 minutes, they run the health evaluation and report back to the SCCM server. So that's to answer that question. So now we have the client on this device or these devices. Now we have to start managing the client. So which is where we're going to start today, just talking about the way the whole policy processing works in SCCM. How policy processing works in SCCM, and also how to configure separate policies for separate group of devices or separate group of users, depending on whichever method you want to use. So let's start with this. So we have the client on this. Which role or which site system role is the client communicating with? So let me even put it this way. So Abdul, you may probably want to go for this. Is there any point in time when this client will be communicating with the site server? So that's a tricky question, just so you're aware. So is there any time that the client will be communicating with the site server? It's a tricky question.
Sorry, again, the question, please.
So you've installed the client, the SSM client on these machines. So this client, what are they communicating with? Are they communicating with the site server?
Okay.
Or where exactly are they communicating? As in, what? It's a question.
Okay. I think the management point.
Yeah, excellent. So they're communicating with the management point, but do they ever communicate directly to the site server? So is there anything that the client needs to do that it's going
One,
to
one,
say?
one thing that confuses people
Mhm.
and that used to confuse me when I was doing this was the difference between site systems and site servers.
Yep,
Yeah,
yep,
because and your management point is a site system role.
yep,
Yeah, but again, you know, you see, I get confused sometimes as well because
yep,
it can be a site server, but a site server is always a site system, or is it the
yep,
other way around?
yep. No, a site
Yeah,
server is a site system also. Yeah.
yeah, that's right. So the thing is, it gets a bit confusing sometimes when you talk about site systems or site servers. You know, so I always, make sure that you have it clear in your head whether you're talking about site system or site server. Because that, it confused me when I did the exam. When I did this exam, the 7243, I failed it like 3 times before I passed it. So,
uh, uh, yeah.
but
So yeah, I don't understand that. So this I mean the thing that I was discussing is, yeah. So the site server it's actually a separate site system role. So we have our site systems, and there are different site system roles. So one of the site system roles is a site server. Another one is the management point. Another one is the distribution point. Another one is the enrollment proxy point. Another one is the enrollment point, and lots of other site system roles like that. Another one is the site database server. So that's a site system role also. So because all this come into place, because what we're discussing client settings, all this come into place when we're discussing how clients get their policies, how they apply their policies, and what's actually going on there. So, for example, um, every communication that the client has, I mean, let me put it this other way. There's no communication that the client has directly with the site server. So let's say this is the site server role. The client never ever communicates directly with the site server role. It always goes through an intermediary of another site system role. So in the Mac world, it could be the enrollment point. So it communicates maybe at the very beginning, communicates with the enrollment point to get the certificate issued. So it's always going. So it's never the client going directly to the site server. So the site server could have all these roles on itself. So you can have all these roles on one server, but all the different components are taking care of their own parts of the job. So the client never ever communicates directly with the site server. Always going to be through an intermediary site system, which Abdul said. Usually, in most situations, it will be the management point. And then the management point will be in communication with the site server. And then the site server as the database is communicating with database. So we'll also talk about this, the situation where the management point will actually communicate with the database directly. But we'll talk about that when we get there. So it's usually, typically, you find a scenario like this where the clients are communicating with management point, the management point is communicating with the site server, which is communicating with the database. So one exception to that is whenever we're doing management. So whenever we're doing management, what are we communicating with, Abdul? So there's an admin sitting down here, has the SCCM console installed on this computer. So after you install the SCCM console, it tells you select the site you want to connect to. You type in the site code that you want to connect to. Which of this site system role are you communicating with?
The site database server.
Site data, excellent. So you're communicating with the database server, and you're communicating through which component are you communicating through?
Um, I forget the session something.
SMS
Uh,
provider.
yeah, SMS provider.
Yeah. So you're
SMS
communicating.
provider.
Yeah. So you're communicating through the SMS provider, to the site database, and that's when you're doing management. So you're communicating directly with the database, not the other way around. Okay, so how do they get their policy from the management point? So do you want to describe the process? And Andrew, is it something that you remember? What's the process that clients? So if clients want to get their policy, what's the process that's going on? Let's describe it from either the side of the so just start with anywhere you want to start, whether from the client side or the server side. A client wants to get its policy. What process does it go through?
Sorry, I was just flipping in and out of the room and I missed most of that. I'm just taking a back seat today. I'm just watching, so
Okay,
you
yeah.
guys carry on.
No problem.
Yeah.
Okay, Abdul then. So what process happens? So this client is about to get its policies. So what process does it go through? So do you know what process it goes through?
I'm drawing a blank today, David.
It's but yeah, Abdul, carry on. What process does it go through? What process does the client goes through, like whenever it wants to get the policy? So okay,
I'm not sure. I'm not sure.
yeah, let me just carry on with it. Okay, so
Okay.
so normally what you have is this. So let's get rid of this. What you have is a process like this. Number one, an administrator, either via the admin console or PowerShell or any other third-party admin, because actually you can connect, if you have, you can write a program that connects to this SMS provider and does the management. So what Microsoft has said is never ever go outside the SMS provider to directly be manipulating the database. So whatever, if you're a programmer and you're programming for a system, what Microsoft has said is they've made a way for you to be able to connect to this SMS provider and achieve anything you want to achieve administratively. But they put, you must communicate to a database via this SMS provider, otherwise you get into trouble or you cause some trouble. Okay, so an administrator goes to the admin console or PowerShell or any third-party admin tool and creates a set of instructions. So in this case, because today we're talking about client settings, that would be something like this. So we're on the SCCM server here, and under administration, you can go under client settings and edit default client settings. So for by default, out of the box, SCCM comes with this default client settings. So you can go ahead and edit it. Let's say you want to edit the client policy and say, I want the client policy polling interval, I want it to be every 20 minutes. So that's one thing that instantly comes up from this, is that SCCM policy is always pull, not push. So that's one thing to start with. So SCCM client policy is a pull process, not a push process. Yeah. So all these clients, once they are installed, they have an initial policy applied to them, which is the one in the default client settings. And by default, every 15 minutes, I think it's 15 minutes. Yeah, I think it's every 15 minutes. So by default, every 15 minutes, they communicate with the server to get the policy. So they communicate with the management point to get the policy. And so I'm asking the management point and I'm pulling the policy to myself. It's not as if the administrator configures the policy here and then it is pushed out to all the clients. It's the clients themselves. So basically, there's an inherent delay in between the time that you give an instruction and when the instruction will be applied, because it depends on when next the client is going to pull the policy and apply the instruction that you've created. So there's that inherent delay there. So, but then after you create this as an administrator, you create the instructions. So the next thing that happens is the policy is created by the site server and stored in the database. So you, as an admin, you've created a set of instructions. You've changed, like what we changed now. You've said client settings. Client will want you to poll for your policy every 20 minutes. Now you've created a set of instructions. Now a policy for that is created or updated. Let me put that, and then we'll make this all clear later. Updated by the site server, and then all those policies, they are stored in the site database, which is this one. Yeah. So they're stored in database. Then what happens is the client requests for the policy from the management point. And I think I said before that by Abdul, do you remember what the default is for clients when the clients are trying to get their policy? Do you remember what the default time is? Is it 1 hour or 15 minutes? I think it's 1 hour, right? Client policy. I think it's every hour by default.
Yeah, average 60 minutes.
Yeah, okay.
1 hour.
Yeah. Thanks for that.
Talking about the CCM eval hour switch, the default.
No, just the client getting their policy. So whenever the client goes to ask the management point and says, is there any new policy for me?
Sorry. I'm thinking about the eval hour, which is the automatic compare, the actual policy. Oh, goodness.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, it's all right. So yeah, I think it's every 1 hour by default. So the client, so let's go ahead. So the client requests from the for the policy from the management point every hour by default. This is configurable, so we know this is something that we can change. So request for policy from the management point every 1 hour by default. So when the client requests the policy from the management point, the management point then queries the database for new policy. So we'll go through all these steps in details in a minute. So the client queries the database for the new policy, and then the database returns the new policy to the client, to the management point. And number 6, then the management point sends the policy to the client. So these are all the things that we'll go through and expatiate on. So these are all the steps that happen. So an administrator creates this one, it's stored in database, and then from whenever the client now queries and asks database goes and queries asks the management point goes and queries database for the new policy, retrieves that new policy, sends the policy to the client, and then we'll talk about this. So first of all, let's see what happens. Let's talk about this first process. An administrator, either via the admin console or PowerShell or any third-party admin to create a set of instructions. Let's talk about that. And let's talk about, because one thing that I've seen is that actually, like, troubleshooting is not really difficult. I'm not sure, does anybody agree that troubleshooting is not really difficult?
No, I think it's difficult, man.
You think it's difficult? What about Andrew? What do you think? You think it's difficult?
Yeah, it's a pain in the butt. There's a lot to take, a lot to do. There's so many things that can go wrong. There's so many. Oh
So,
goodness.
so
Yeah.
that's one thing. Well, but I actually think it's not difficult if you're able to understand, because everything that happened actually in the field that we work in IT, everything that happened is logical, right? So I'll give you an example of something like I work for an IT security company where they make software. So part of the thing they do is make software, right? So actually our technical support guys, like I see some of the things on their desks. They have like all these pamphlets that explains because it's a program, right? It's something that's logical. It's not something that's doing something random. It's something that has to be told exactly what to do. If this client is communicating and sending an information to this management point, somebody has told it to do that very program. It's not just happening randomly. It's something that it has been instructed or programmed to do it this way. So if you can understand the steps of the program right from the beginning and trace it all the way to the end, troubleshooting is not difficult, because if I can understand every single step and everything that's going on, all I need to do is follow this step and find out where did something break. So for example, an administrator giving an instruction, just creating a set of instructions, I can find out where does that log, whatever is happening, where does it keep that log? So maybe it keeps it in the SMS provider log. So I can check in the SMS provider log, are these instructions being delivered to the site database? I can check the SMS database monitoring log and check, is this actually being stored in database? Because if it's not stored, you see the message there. So after it's stored in database, I can follow like all these steps one after the other, because it's something that somebody actually had to program and program it to act this way. So if you can have the information as to how this thing has been programmed to operate right from, the initiation of the client communication right to the application, you can just trace it from A to Z and find out where something is broken in that chain, and then you find out what's wrong. But that's the part that I think is difficult, not troubleshooting itself. It's the part of trying to understand how the people that programmed it have programmed it to work. I'm not sure. What do you think? That's my thought. Because I see like, yeah.
I think it's a huge pill to swallow. Yeah, it's huge. There's a huge technical manual to swallow just on client installation
Yeah.
and troubleshooting.
Yeah.
Now, I learned it inside out for SCCM 2007. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then SCCM 2012 comes out and it all changes.
Yeah.
So it's a case of like, from my perspective, it was difficult for me because because on SCCM 2007, you had inboxes, and it was file-based replication, file-based communication.
Mm-hmm.
This was before they went over to SQL in Server 2012 as a method of direct communication between the clients.
Yeah.
And got to change the way you're thinking and change and completely rewrite and completely understand it all, and it's a lot to take in.
Yeah, exactly. Which I think is the difficult part. The difficult part is it's a lot to take in, or even not. It's not only is it a lot to take in. Is sometimes like, where do you get like the exact accurate information as to how this is programmed? For example, if you read technical articles, many times they'll just talk about configuration and not really like the deep dive as to this is how this has been programmed to work. So you actually have to scout for blogs and all kinds of instructions from different places to get to understand how somebody has programmed this to work. Because that information just won't come out from Microsoft directly like that. So that's like the part that I think is like the difficult part. But once you get that part, but you agree that once you get the part of, if I can trace something from A to Z, basically I can troubleshoot anything, because all I need to do is follow through the steps and go from A to Z and find out if the thing has been programmed and says, okay, you have a client here. This is just an illustration, and the client is supposed to communicate with this component, and then this component is supposed to pass that information to this component, and if this fails, I want you to log a message into this log. So it makes it easy if I have this information of all these steps, because once I have all this information, then I can go, okay, someone is like, this is broken. Okay, did this one pass this information to this one? Yes. If it did, where can I confirm that it did? So maybe it's been configured to create a log entry whenever this is successful. So I go and check that log and I check the log entry and see, okay, that's successful. So this is not broken. So what's the next step? So this one is supposed to take that message and pass it on to this guy. So what happens is if it passes it on to this guy, it's supposed to log a message here. And then I go to check this log and I notice, well, it's not logged any message here. So which means it's probably failed at this point. So if it's failed, has it been configured to log a message somewhere else? Yeah.
It's Brenda.
We know
I'm from Hong Kong.
we like you, Brenda. Thanks. Yeah. And then we know that it's supposed to log a message in this log here. And basically if one can get a clear understanding, a clear picture of how exactly the people that programmed any application in this world, it doesn't matter if it's a networking product, any application in this world, if you can get the information of exactly the way the people that programmed it have programmed it to work, you can troubleshoot anything. But like as Andrew said, it's a lot to take in. There's a lot of information that you have to take in to understand even remotely a little bit of, even especially when you're talking about Microsoft, of what you know the way they've programmed something to work. So, but once you can get this, at least you have a better shot of troubleshooting.
In SCCM 2007,
Yeah.
there used to be a document called Superflows. I don't know if you've ever heard of that.
No. Superflows, no.
If you type Superflows in Google, it's an absolutely brilliant document. And what it was you see, like you've bullet pointed and you've drawn the numbers and the points from step to step of how SCCM is thinking, how it is working.
Okay, yeah.
Flows,
Yeah.
Now, they were great because it showed how your client talked to a management point, how your client talked to the distribution point, showed basically all the various scenarios. And I remember working with a consultant, and I'm looking frantically for them here. I had these presentations, given to me by Microsoft, because I used to be a DDPS consultant, actually going in, as through a Microsoft partnership, demonstrating SCCM. And I had these flowcharts, and I was explaining. I was just simply following on the screen, And it's like, no joke, there's like about 15 different charts and 15 different workflows, which I had to explain through to people. And by the time I got through the fifth one, you'd see people's eyes begin to glaze over. It's a lot. It's a lot to take in.
Yeah, exactly. Which is like the part, which exactly, the thing with our technical support. So because they have direct contact with the guys that actually wrote the programs, right? So the guys that actually wrote the program has given them and said, hey, this component, this process in Windows is supposed to call this other process. And if it fails to call this other process, it locks it here. If it's successful, it locks it here. And then this other process stores this information in this database. So basically all they need to go is say, hey, can you click that button? Yeah, click that button. Have a look at this log. Have a look at this log. What can you see there? Oh, I can see it's saying it failed. Okay, I know where your problem is. Can you click this other button? What happened? Because the people that programmed it has given them that information and said, this is how we've programmed this thing to work. And basically, this is what you need to do to troubleshoot any issue or most issues. Just follow this one, follow this process, check if this one is successful, check if this one has failed, and all that. And then, so I do agree. But the thing is, sometimes, it's not sometimes, actually, it is a lot to take in. It is a lot to take in. So that's like the difficult part. So what we'll attempt to do, so again, don't crucify me on this, because this won't be extremely accurate, because these are just things that I've gleaned from different blogs myself and all that, especially some TechNet blogs, which I'll post there. So it's attempts to understand like what exactly happens like doing this client policy, so that at least we have a better shot. If there's a problem with a client applying a particular policy, we have a better shot at troubleshooting what the issue is, because at least we just have a bit better idea of how the whole process flows. So, like we said, right from the beginning, an administrator logs into an administrator console and creates a set of instructions. So, if I go to the config manager server here, and for example, I have the default client settings here. Let's say I change this to say actually, let's just do it right there from the beginning. Let me close everything. Let's close everything. Let me bring up the configuration manager trace tool. And and let's open this log, the SMS provider log, the one that we mentioned about SMS prov.log. So that's under the C drive, under program files, config manager logs, and then bring up the SMS provider logs. So this one shows us whenever anyone logs into the administration console, either locally or remotely, what's happening will be logged here. So, because this can actually help you, because I remember mentioning that, Abdul, at the beginning, that I remember like one issue I had more recently where some people were trying to log into the admin console, but it was failing for them. But actually, if you go here, you'll see exactly what the problem is, because it will tell you here, anyone that's trying to connect to the admin console, the information will be logged here under smsprovider.log. So you can see the last event is 2147. Time is 2149 now. If I go ahead and open the admin console, now you see the logs start filling up here. And here we go. And basically, it's basically checking who is the person that attempting to log in, what do I have permissions to access, what's the version of the console that I'm trying to use to log in. So it's going to show, hey, I'm running this console. That's the process itself, or the application itself. That's the version that I'm running. So because if you're running a version that's much lower than your SMS provider support, your connection will fail, which was what happened in that case. So they were running a much lower version of the SCCM console than the current SMS provider that we're running. So you can see the component SMS provider that it supports. So they had the right credentials, everything else was right, but the version of the client of the admin console that they're running was very low. And then you find that very, very clearly in the log that says, hey, it's because of it's a lower version. That's why they're not able to connect. So, and it's telling you every window that it's opening up. And it's checking also, do I have permission? What's my role-based access permission? And this is where you find that. So an administrator opens up this console and goes under administration, for example. I go under client settings and I make a change. I go under properties there. And any change that I make, what will happen is any change that I make here, let me go back. If I go to client policy and change this from 16, let's change this to 10. Any change that I make here, so let's bring up the paint and let's create a new whiteboard so we can make it clear as to which logs we can look into for each process. So the administrator doing that, and what can we look into in case we need to verify or troubleshoot, see what's going on. Okay, say SMS provider logs interactions with the So again, remember that anything you're doing, whether you're using PowerShell, even if I go and open PowerShell, so if I go back, so whether you're using the admin console or PowerShell or a third-party tool you're coming to SMS provider, either via PowerShell, admin console, or third-party tool. Because what could happen is if I go back to my server and connect to config-mgr via PowerShell. So I have the SMS provider log. So that's 2150. Let's close this. So I just closed the PowerShell window, and you can see it's logged a bunch of stuff here. So, but let me open the PowerShell window again. So that's 215303 is the last event. Actually, let's just close all this. Let me open up this one again. Let's wait for it to finish all the logs and let everything settle down. So we have 215327, and then I go connect via Windows PowerShell. Yeah, can you see that also? So that's 20. So, and that's showing the application that I'm using, admin UI PowerShell provider.dll. So it's showing even if I'm connecting through PowerShell to the SMS provider, everything is going to be logged there, because for you to get to the database, you go via the SMS provider. And even if you're using a third-party tool to administer config-mgr, it still has to come through here. If you look at the MSDN page for programming config-mgr, Microsoft specifically makes it clear you must, and they put that must, they highlighted it and say you must go via the SMS provider to make any changes to the database. And how the SMS provider is using is WEMI. But I hope that's clear now, that's one to check. So then when you create a set of instructions, what happens is the set of instructions are made into policies. But what makes them into policies, so you can actually see the policy creation, is a component of config-mgr called the policy provider. And you see the log for the policy provider in policy-prov.log. So let us just make a bit of change and see if we see anything in policy provider. So this is the SMS provider. Let's open policy provider and click open on that. And actually just looking through past events, you see exactly. So any set of instructions you create as an admin ends up being processed by the policy provider component, and it basically converts them into a policy. Now, when we talk about what policy looks like, we'll get there in a bit. So, for example, if you look at past events, you see where it started to build policies. So, if I go, or even let me just make a change here. So, look at this. That's 213236 is the last event. So, let's make a change to the default client settings. Let's go default client settings, client policy. Every 5 minutes, we want you to poll management point. So that's 213236. And if I go OK, and then shortly we should see the policy provider. Yeah, there we go, 2156. So instantly it picked up, oh, there's a new set of instructions. So I either have to create a new policy or I have to update an existing policy with these new settings. In which case, if you look down here, it's just gonna, if I search for, I can go for, let's search for default. Sorry, not this one. Scroll down. Let's search for default again. Let's go direction hub and F3. I'm not finding the exact name of the policy, but basically, I think if I keep going, I'll find it. What it's basically doing is it's updating the policy, the existing policy, for the default client settings updating it to say this is the new settings for this, and you find that information in here. Now if you create a policy and then you come in here and then you see a bunch of error messages here, so which means you've created the policy, but the policy provider is having trouble forming. You've created a set of instructions, but it's having trouble forming the set of instructions that you've created into policies. And what the policy provider does is, after creating the policy, so let's go back again. So policy provider, let me just put it this way in my own word, converts the instructions into policies and then stores the policy in the database. And then where you can see where it's storing the policy in database is in the log smsdb.log. Because again, if I go back to this one, so we're just talking about step 1 now. If I come back to this one and I bring up this log and I go open smsdb it's not smsdb, so smsdb monitor.log, and I click open, for example. So I'll make another change to that client settings and then we'll see what happens. So this is basically logging anything that's entered into the database. So again, if you come here and you're finding an error message relating to being unable to enter something into the database, what it's basically showing you is that the policy provider has formed this policy, but there's a problem trying to enter this policy into the database. There's a problem with trying to store it in database. So if I go back to the client settings and make another change, so the database monitor is showing 215631, and then if I say computer agent, client policy, let me change this to 50 rather than 5 and say okay, and then go back to see this guy. So again, that goes to be processed by the policy provider component. Policy provider component, there we go, finishes processing it and begins to write to your database, and then you see the update. So this update of the setting that I just changed, it will update the policy that's stored in database with that particular settings, and then you see that being entered there. So I think the next thing that I wanted to show is where exactly the policy looks like in the database itself, because actually when I was looking at this, it helped me to understand a bit much more about what the configuration because sometimes you read documentation but you're not really relating to it because you're not seeing what's going on. So I've read documentations where they talk about, yeah, we have policy assignments and policy bodies. I'm like, yeah, okay, yeah, policy assignment, policy bodies. But when you go into the actual database and you see the table that's actually storing the policies, then it becomes much more clearer when it's talking about, this is talking about policy assignment or policy bodies. So I'll connect to the database for config-mgr, in this case CMUK2, which is my site code. I go on the tables here, expand the tables, and if you look down here, there will be dbo.policy somewhere here. Yeah, dbo.policy. So let's see what the table looks like. Let's run that. Select the top 1000 rows in there. So this is dbo.policy, and then there's another one called dbo.policy assignment, and I'll hopefully try to make this clear. Okay, so here's the database table that stores all the actual policies. So one thing you find is you find the policy ID. We'll talk about that in a minute. Let's scroll forward here. You see a version number. That's becoming more understandable. That's becoming more clearer now. Because right from then, even just by seeing the word version number, you already know, just by seeing the word version, you already have an assumption of what that's referring to. What do you think that's referring to, Abdul? Version. So it has a policy ID here, and instantly there's a version next to it. So what do you think the version is referring to?
That's mean this is the default one, and there is no changes in this policy.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, that's right. So for example, the one that's showing as number 8, that could be the one that I keep changing over and over again. So if I go ahead and make another change and it updates this policy, it will probably increment this place to version 9. So whenever the client comes and the client says, "Oh, I've already applied this policy," it's going to be like, yeah, but this is version 9. You have version 8 already applied, but the new version is version 9. So the client will be like, something has changed in this policy. Can I request the new version to be downloaded? So that's like what happens in that. So it's got a policy ID, it's got a version number, and look at this, it's got something called a body, a policy body. And instantly we see like all this jumbled character, because this will take us into the next thing that we'll explain. Because the policy body in itself, in the SQL database, it's encrypted, which is why you see on this jumbled character here. It's because you're looking at an encrypted form of the policy body. So this leads us to something else. We're still talking about the whole process, right? But let's quickly mention something about config manager policies, because there are two. Let's make this bigger. Let's make it much bigger than that. So let's put it this way. There are two parts to a client policy. So that's an important thing to know. And the two parts to a client policy is the policy assignment and the policy body. So those two parts are the two parts of the policy. Now we explain the reason why this one is important. So policy assignment, just know for now that it just contains rules, or let me call it compatibility rules. Whereas this one, the policy body, is the policy settings itself, or themselves. So this is just the compatibility rules. This is the policy body. So let's explain, how does this work, or what does this mean? When we talk about compatibility rules, policy assignment, policy body, what does this mean? This is what it means. We have a client here, right? We have a management point here. We have a the config manager database server here. So client, management point, database. So here's what happens. A client goes and says, so we'll come back to this, but a client goes and says, management point, it's configured at a particular interval. Let's say we've configured every 15 minutes. Every 15 minutes it comes and says, management point, do you have any policies for me? Management point goes off and says, hey, database, what are the policies that you have? And database sends a list. So this is important. Sends a list of the policies and the policy body. So you don't need to know what it means yet, but let's just put it this way. Sends a list of the policy assignment and the policy body to the management point. So management point now has a list of every policy assignment and a list of every policy body. You understand what it means when we start breaking it down now. So what happens is the management point sends only the policy assignment to the client. And what does that mean? Besides, policy assignment contains compatibility rule. So let's step back a bit. An administrator is sitting down here on the admin console. Creates a new policy that is stored in the database. When he creates this new policy, let's just say for demonstration purpose, the ID of this policy ID is 111. That's the ID of this policy. The body of this policy is poll every 15 minutes. So that's the body of that policy, just for demonstration purpose, or just for explanation purpose. So policy ID is 111, policy body is poll every 15 minutes. Now, this policy has to apply to a particular client or a particular description, because it's a default client policy. It means it applies to everybody. But let's say in this case, I create a custom policy, apply it to a particular collection. That's not going to apply to everybody. That's only going to apply to people who are in this collection. So what that will happen is this policy that this admin has created, that's the policy ID, this is the body of the policy. It now says this is the policy assignment that this policy ID applies to. And inside that policy assignment will be something like this. Every client. Or it could be something like this. Every client in the B collection. That's the policy assignment part of the policy. So when the client is downloading only this one, so it downloads only this one and evaluates and see which of these assignments do I match up with. So if you download policy assignment, so policy assignment also has an ID. So I'm not sure. Am I confusing you already, Abdul? Like any questions so far? I don't want to go too far. Any questions so far? You're right there, Abdul. You're not lost yet.
Okay. For
Abdul, sorry.
It's Brenda here.
Carry on, Andrew.
Oh,
Yeah.
I thought you were calling me then. You would talk to Abdul. Good. I'll chill out then.
Okay. Yeah, okay, Abdul, carry on.
Okay. Here the policy ID
Yep.
and the policy body.
Yep.
Okay.
So let me make it a bit more clearer here. Let's say policy assignment. Let me remove this. Let's say X. Policy assignment is 001. So this is what you find in the other table. So you have a policy ID, right? The ID of the policy. You have the policy body, which is the actual policy itself. Now you have a policy assignment, which is 001, right? Now there's now another table here. That table stores policy assignments. And that policy assignment will go like this: ID 001. And policy assignment rule is member of B collection. Right? So now you have to, and let me show that to you. So you see this is the one for the policy table, right? So it has the policy ID, right? It has the version. It has the policy body, right? And if I keep scrolling here, it has the policy body there. Then if I go here, let me go select top 1000 rows of this one. And then you see the policy assignment ID, right?
Okay.
You see policy assignment ID is pointing to a policy ID. So I need to actually make a change to this. So let me go make a change to this one. So it's not this way, it's the other way around. So you have policy assignment. So let me delete this. So let's get rid of this. So policy itself just contains the policy ID and the settings of the policy, right? Then there's another table that contains something like policy assignment ID is 001. The policy that applies to this assignment ID is policy, bless you, policy 111. And the rule of this policy assignment is member of B collection. So this is what happens, Abdul. Whenever you go to the config manager client and you go machine policy refresh, this is what happens. So you have these two stored in database, right? you have policy assignment information and policy information. So this is what happens. Again, remember that all these are cached on the management point. So what happens is the client requests for this. The management point sends the policy assignment.
PowerShell, Hyper-V, and directory.
It's recorded. Okay, yeah. So you've got yeah. So the client asks for the policy, right? The management point sends the policy assignment to the client. And this is going to be a lot of policy assignment, but let's just put this one. So the client goes, okay, this policy assignment 001, the rule is member of collection. The policy ID that applies to this assignment is 111, right? Member of collection B is the rule. So the client evaluates itself against this rule. Am I a member of collection B? Yes. If I'm a member of collection B, then I go back to the management point and said, I've evaluated all these policy assignments. Policy assignment 001 applies to me. All the policy IDs that applies to assignment 001, can you send it to me? Then this policy gets transferred over to the client for application. Because this one is heavier than this one, I'm not sure. Is that confusing, Abdul, again?
No, I think the picture is getting clear now.
Yeah. So let's go back to this one again, to database. You have the policy here, right? You have the policy ID, but you see the policy assignment here is pointing to a particular policy ID.
Okay.
And basically what the client is evaluating is saying, okay, am I in line with this policy assignment? I'm only going to, so when I request and say management point, give me the policy assignment. Management point is like, these are the policy assignments. Okay, I have all these policy assignments. I evaluate myself against them. Any one of them that I match up with the rules, any one of them, I will now request for the policy information itself. Then I will download the policy body, which is the actual settings itself. But I won't get all the actual settings because not all of them applies to me. But the way for me to know the only ones that apply to me is by evaluating the policy assignment. Abdul, I want to confuse you here, but yeah, what do you think? So, because when you read in documentation and they say, yeah, there are two parts to the client policy assignment, policy body. Sometimes it's really not clear as to, what they're referring to, like policy assignment, policy body, and then they go ahead and say, and the client downloads the policy, downloads the policy assignment, and then request for the applicable policy bodies after. But let's do a short demonstration here.
Okay. If you go back to the client policy setting, okay.
Yep.
Can you just point to the the policy ID and the policy body, and that's one. That's from the console.
No. Absolutely
No,
no.
if you go to the default client setting properties.
Yeah. Okay. So if I go properties.
Okay. Yeah, this is the policy. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. From here, how can I how would I distinguish between the body and the ID from here?
So not from here. So you won't be able to do. So like all these are just something that. So basically, typically, these are not things that you, except from something really deep has gone wrong. You won't actually be like that much concerned about all these because they happen in the background. But let's say you want to troubleshoot, then it becomes important, it becomes useful to have some of this information. Because whenever, for example, you've heard of people talk about the policy spy, right? The policy spy tool. If I go to the client, for example, you've heard of this tool. config-mgr 2012 how-to toolkit. Have you heard of this tool before? So it's part of the config-mgr toolkit. Abdul, have you heard this tool, the part of the config-mgr toolkit is this tool called the policy spy.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
so. Yeah, I know that. Yeah.
Yeah. So okay, just to give you an illustration, like you go to, actually, if I just go, let's make this one bigger. Let's go to, okay, policy evaluator, for example. You see things like, let's see, policy evaluator. Let me scroll up. Yeah, for example, you see things like applying policy. This one. So basically, typically, you're not really like concerned about like these random numbers or random letters, or you see things like applying policy FEC 1001000, right? But hold on, look at this. So that's FEC and 10,000. If I go to the config manager server and bring up database table and go under the policies and policy assignment, let's go under the policies themselves. Yeah, there you go. Policy FEC 1000. Now, I personally am still trying to find out if someone knows. You probably can help us here, but I'm still trying to find out exactly. Because even just looking on PowerShell and just looking for get CM client settings, I can't find. PowerShell is not showing me information about. This is the ID of this particular client setting or anything like that. So this unique ID is not the same one. So this is different, because that's another thing that we better mention now, is that a client setting does not necessarily equals to a policy. Just so you are aware of that. Because, for example, if I create an application and I deploy that application, that's a policy, right? That's an instruction that I've created, and that gets passed on to the client, right? But that's not necessarily like a client settings, because policies go way beyond client settings. It could be, so you create a compliance item, for example, a configuration baseline. You create that baseline, you deploy it to clients, that's a policy also. But I guess one way that I can help you to make this clearer is, let me see if this helps a little bit. So can you see this? Can you see the screen, right? You can see this, the policy number is policy 75. The last number is policy 75, right?
Yes.
So the thing again is, let me copy all this. And then let's bring up, yeah, I don't have Excel on this machine, but let's just bring up WordPad. There's WordPad. Yeah, okay. Let's just bring up WordPad. Let's paste this. Yeah, it's gonna be a lot of stuff. But yeah, the last policy here is policy 75. Yeah. So let me go and create a new client settings, a new custom client settings. So create custom client device settings, and call these IT desktops, and configure the client policy, and say client policy is not 50 minutes, it's 180 minutes, and say okay. Now I've created that. If I go to, so if I look in the database monitoring, you'll see that will be entered into database. That's 2221. So it stores that information in database, but that's not a policy. So what will happen actually is, if I go back to database and I refresh this query, you see that the policy number is still number 75. That's like still the number of policies that are available. Then if I go to this particular one, IT desktop, and I say, I want to deploy you. and I want to deploy it to everyone in the IT desktops collection. Now that's a policy. The deployment of that client setting is now a policy. So I go, okay, and then let's just monitor this one to make sure it's entered there. Yep, that's 2222. Client settings assignment. And then what should happen is if I go back and refresh the policy, let's go back and go policy ID and go. Now let's see. Yeah, so now you see policy is now up to 77. So which means it's now created a new policy that it's stored here. But that policy has a policy ID. It has the setting that I've configured. So if I want, I can actually go and track it down. I mean, I don't know of like an easy way to really get like what settings map to which policies. And actually, the Microsoft documentation that I went through for this actually said that's like basically what he said is basically that's all you need to know. That's it. Now I would like to know more because I would like to understand exactly the way you've programmed this thing to work, because then that will help me if something terrible goes on and I need to go as deep as possible. Yeah, I can always call Microsoft if I have Microsoft support. So, but yeah, it's just a good thing for me to at least have an understanding of what's going on, so at least I can explain something properly to management if I'm asked a question like that. But again, Abdul, the main thing to take away from this is the policy has two parts: the policy assignment, the policy body. So in the policy assignment, you have the ID of the policy, and in the policy itself, you have the ID of the policy and the policy body, which is the actual settings that this policy is delivering to the machine. The policy assignment is only an applicability rule, if you permit me to use that word. So this is the rule that defines whether who this policy applies to. So the first thing the client downloads, so whenever a client goes to ask for the management point and say, give me, are there any new policies? The thing it downloads first is the policy assignment, and it checks itself against that policy assignment. Excuse me, can we switch off the heater? Can we switch off the heater? Sorry. Thanks. So it downloads the policy assignment. So after downloading the policy assignment, it checks itself against the policy assignment and see which ones which policies are applicable to me. So if this one says this policy assignment is 001, policy ID that applies to this policy assignment is 111. The rule is you must be a member of collection B. And then I evaluate myself against this rule. I'm a member of collection A. I'm not a member of collection B. So there's no need for me to request for the policy body for this, because this doesn't apply to me. So basically, I just check and evaluate. Does this apply to me? Yes, it does. Does this not apply to me? No, it doesn't. All the ones that apply to me, give me the policy bodies. So I download the policy bodies from the management point. And then the management point actually caches all this. So if another client comes in and says, hey, can I get out the policy assignment? Here, the policy assignment. It just caches it here, gives it to that other client. The other client gets it, evaluates it, and says, can I get this policy body? It's already cached on the management point. Yep, there you go. There's the policy body. But let's go a bit further. If this one will probably become much more clear. So okay, we've talked about this one. So you create a policy. The admin creates the instruction. Policy provider converts it into a policy. You can check in policy provider log. SMSDB monitoring will show you as it's entered into the database. You can actually view the policy if you go to the dbo.policy table in your config-mgr database, and you see what the policies are like. So the next thing is, okay, which is number 2. The policy is created and stored in the database. So we've checked where to check for that. So basically what you have to check for this one is check the SMSDB monitoring log to see if anything is entered when you're creating your policies. So here you're checking the SMS provider log. You're also checking the policy provider log. Okay. Client requests policy for the policy from the management point everywhere by default, and this is configurable. So the next part is when the client actually now goes to request the policy from the config manager. So this one, the thing to, let's go to a client there, config manager client. Actually, let's just use this other one. Let's use this. I mean, it's also a client. I hope it's a client already. Let's go control panel. Let's check config manager client. Nope, it's not a client yet. So we can ignore this. So actually this demonstration may not work properly because I think I broke my management point while doing a lot of test and practice and other stuff. So, but let's just go through the crux of this. So the crux of this is whenever your client requests for the policy, there are two main logs to have a look at. So the two main logs to have a look at whenever your client requests for policy from the management point is the policy agent.log and then the policy evaluator.log. So even from hearing these names, you should be able to tell, what exactly they are doing. So for example, policy agent.log will show you when the config manager is sending a request to the server. And then, when it gets the request, it's getting just policy assignment. So let's go to this one. Let's go bring up the client. Let's do a machine policy retrieval cycle. But before doing this, let's bring up CM trace. And let's open, so on the client, policy agent, and that's 12/12/2015, 22/29. So if I go force a refresh now, there you go, and instantly we see lots of, so that was the last one. So you can see, now look at that. Can you see that, Abdul? Is that clear? Can you see this? So when
I can see this, yes.
Yeah, when I clicked on this, can you see what it said? What did it say is requesting?
Requesting machine policy assignment.
Exactly. You can see it's requesting machine policy assignment. So at this point, it's just requesting, can I get all the assignments that are available there? Then get the assignment, evaluate itself against them. And then after that, if I go to view the policy evaluator, then it's actually going to now say, okay, these are the ones that apply to me. Can I download this, please? Can I download this, please? Because these are the ones that apply to me. Because there's been no change, it says no changes detected. But if I make a change, what will happen is it evaluates the policy assignment, find out which policies applies to those assignments, which one. So I download all the policy assignments, right? And I go, does this match me? Yes, this one matches me. This one doesn't match me. Okay, the one that matches me, can I get the policy bodies for them? And then when it gets the bodies, then policy evaluator will show you what's going on, where it's actually downloading the bodies of the policies themselves. So if, for example, if I take you up here, and you can see where it's actually talking to the management point and saying, can you give me this actual policy body? Because this applies to me. So this is where it's actually applying the policies themselves after it has downloaded the ones that apply to it. But you see, policies are downloaded and evaluated for the reply of correlation GUID. And all these ones that you're looking at there, where it's raising event for this one, and it's updating settings here. So these are where it's actually downloading the policies from the management, the policy body from the management point. So one thing to note in this whole process is, excuse me, whenever you're troubleshooting any policy issues with the client, you've configured something and it's not getting to the client, check the policy agent.log. Check that the client, so if, for example, if the client finds a new policy assignment that applies to it, you'll find that information in the policy agent.log, where the client will actually say, yep, I've found this number of policies that apply to me. Let me see if I can find an event like that up here. It actually shows when it says, I found this number of policies. Let's go F assignments, where it says I found this number of policy assignments that apply to me, and then it's going to say, now can I start downloading the bodies? Let's go up. Zero assignment. Let's go way up. More than zero assignment. Okay, yeah, I saw one now, which says 2 assignments. Yeah, here we go. So received machine delta policy update. So in this case, those were probably the ones where I was making a change or making just editing the same policy where the version number has changed. So it's like received machine delta policy update with 2 assignments. So that's one thing to check. So whenever you see that, okay, I've got a number of assignments that apply to me, then you check in the policy evaluator, is it actually downloading those assignments from the management point? And then there's an equivalent of these 2 logs on the management point itself. So on the management point itself, so where the client is requesting for this, on the management point, you can also see the mp_getPolicy.log or mp_policy.log, not or, and. So both these two are like the equivalents on the management point. So policy agent.log is where the client is requesting for policy assignment. mp_getPolicy will show you when the assignments are coming into the management point and when the management point is responding back with the policy assignment to the client. So that's mp_getPolicy.log. And so mp_policy.log will show you where the client begins to download the policy bodies. So this one will actually show you I'm sending this policy body to this client. And these 2 logs, where can I find these 2 logs, Abdul? Which location do you think I can find these 2 logs on the management point?
The location of the logs?
The location of logs. Yeah, that was what I thought also. don't feel bad for thinking about that also. But if I go to Program Files, Config Manager, go under Logs,
okay,
I can't find anything like mp_getPolicy, can I? No, nothing.
No.
I can see mp_control, which just tells you the installation. Well, I can't see anything like mp_getPolicy or mp_policy. So actually, this is a good thing to know, because whatever role you install, whether it's management point or distribution point, those roles have their own separate logs. Always note that.
Okay.
And sometimes, not all the time, sometimes, like in the case of the distribution point, in the case of the management point, in the case of the distribution point, in the case of the management point, those logs are actually in a separate location. So under Program Files, normally you see this one here, SMS CCM, on that machine. So that's where you find those logs. So for example, I can see the mp_getPolicy and the mp_policy.log here. So if I go mp_getPolicy.log and mp_policy.log, yeah, of course I broke my management point. yeah. But so mp_getPolicy.log will show you when clients are requesting for the policies. And And when the management point is for the policy assignment, and when the management point is responding back, mppolicy.log will show you when clients are successfully downloading the policy bodies. That's in mppolicy.log. So that's in that stage. And then the management point, in this case, queries database for new policy. So it only does this if there's been a change. So if there's been a change to the policies, they are downloaded. So remember we said they are cached to the management point. So they are not something that management point downloads every single time. There's something that management point caches, and then if another client comes and says, give me the policy assignment, the management point just goes, here you go, here are the policy assignment. And you know the reason why this one is good. The reason why this one is good is even because I even experienced this recently. In the case that this guy ever happens to go down, yeah, your client can still download policies up to the latest point that the management point has cached the policies from the management point, which is why it's one of the good practices of configuration manager design to separate every role that is talking to the client from the site server. Because in that case, if something were to happen to the site server and the site server were to be taken out, you still have time to be fixing this, while clients can still be getting policies up to the last time that the management point has cached these policies. And you can even, carry on, Abdul. Carry on.
Okay. We have 3 remote sites, okay?
Yeah.
And we install 3 server.
Yeah.
And we install the distribution point role on that servers.
Yeah.
But now I think it is best practice to install the management points in this servers also.
That's not bad. Install management point, distribution points, no problem. They can live together if you've got enough resources. The issue comes when you're having the site server on the same server. So that's okay for like small. If there's if you're a small business that can't really afford like much servers, that's okay. But if you can, it's good practice to separate any role that is communicating with the client from the backend site server role. It's good practice. Okay. So that way, the site server stands here. If this were to go down, clients are still communicating and getting policies up to that time. And what will happen is that the other thing is everything that client is reporting back will actually be stored, like what Andrew said earlier about the file application process of config manager. Because if you look in the inboxes of the management point, when the clients are reporting back their inventory and everything, management point will actually be caching all this information, so you won't actually lose them. So the clients will think, we're reporting everything back. So management point will actually be caching all this information, and when the site server comes back on, transfers all those information so they can be put in database. And then the other good thing that can happen is that actually, if you want to switch your management point, let's say you have another management point here, and that management point has a more recent version of the policies, you can just use group policy to modify the registry key on the client and point them to this other management point that has a more recent version of the policies. But that's just like a generally good practice. Separates the endpoint communicating part from the backend. So yeah.
Okay, how the management point is helpful while installing the client?
Why installing the client?
Yeah.
As in installing the client, like client push or.
Yeah, client push.
A lot of reasons. We talked about that a lot. One of the things that we talked about is, remember that actually.
Why I'm asking this, I noticed that I installed the client manually on a client which is, in the same network, okay?
Yeah.
And, after maybe 15 to 20 minutes, I can see everything is working fine, all the policies is there.
Yeah.
But for the also I installed the client on a remote machine.
Yeah.
but I'm not getting, the policy. Only even the site assignment.
Yeah.
It's not yet. It's talk long. And I didn't check again if it's assigned or not.
Yeah.
So
one thing to
if I
notice.
install the management point in the remote server,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
Which is I install the distribution point role there.
Yeah.
It will be helpful while installing the client, pushing the client.
Yeah,
either manually or
it will.
pushing.
Automatic installation, because whenever you're doing automatic installation, if you watch some of the old videos, you see that you made reference to this one. So when you're doing automatic client push installation, the client, you go and say config manager, push the client to this machine. Then the client downloads the client.tcl file and evaluates it. So where is the client actually downloading all the prerequisites and the client files? Where is it downloading them from? It's not talking to a distribution point. It's talking to the management point. It's downloading them from the management point.
Yeah. Okay. Okay.
So if I go and I say push this to a machine. So for example, if I go, let me see if I can demonstrate this one again. If I go config manager server, let's look for maybe a client that doesn't have a client already. Maybe my DC2 in this case. If I go and push it to this guy, and then this guy starts to do the download. If I go config manager, oh, okay, this one won't help. The reason why this one won't help is that my management point and the distribution point are on the same server. But what happens is if I go here and I go install client, and I install the client on this machine, if you actually go to this machine and do a net start to view where the machine is downloading the content from, it's downloading from a distribution point. Sorry, from the management point, not distribution point. So okay. Yeah, not from distribution. So it's downloading it from the management point. So because it just goes, if I go LB SCCM2, yeah, it's just downloading it directly from here. But this is from the management point. No, not from tool, sorry, from client. But that's where it's connecting to download it. So, and that's from the management point, not from the distribution point. So that's one thing to note. So yeah, it will help. But putting distribution points in the remote site will help you to control. We also talked about this. Will help you to control downflow of traffic, but not upflow of traffic. Because upflow of traffic, what that means is that whenever your clients are communicating, they're communicating with the management points in their location, right? If you bind them by using the new method in config manager, in the new version of config manager, so they're communicating with the management point in their location, but that information is going straight up to the site server, right? You have no control over the upward flow of traffic. Whereas,
is the issue with these clients on a remote site, is it that they're not seeing the management point? Are they not connecting in at all?
Abdul, is it that they're not connecting in? I thought your question was that they are connecting, but it's low. Or what's the issue?
I can see, the configuration manager applet there, okay, but the policy, I cannot see the site. The site is not assigned on that applet, okay.
Yeah. When you install, did you run CCM setup manually?
Yeah, I install it manually.
Did you use any switches, any command line switches with it?
Yeah, I use the management point switches, and I mentioned the server name there.
Okay.
But still, it's not getting the policy.
No, if they're not.
Did you use the fully qualified domain name of the management points?
I didn't give it that. No, I used the server name, not the FQDN.
Okay. Were you able to?
The host name.
Okay. Might be an idea to see if you can connect directly from that site, Are other clients able to connect in okay from that site?
Let me give it a try and I'll check. That you mean that if I mention the full qualified domain name, maybe this will be the reason?
Could be.
Yeah, it's worth trying again. Yeah. But
Okay.
yeah,
Let
but
me
then
try that.
the other thing that you mentioned when you talked about, see, one of the reasons why it's good to remember all the processes that we're talking about now, and also the ones that we're talking about like before, because many admins go, why do I need to get like all this information? When something does go wrong, the reason why you need to to get all this information, because then you know exactly what steps it's pointing to. Like the one for that it's not assigning itself to a site. Remember we talked about the site assignment process. Remember we talked about the method it looks to assign itself to a site, because that's like the first thing it does. So assign itself to a site. So remember all the processes. If you need to, go watch the videos again and follow through all the steps one by one in terms of how does it assign itself. So if you're specifying the site directly in the command line, fine. If you're not specifying in the command line, you're expecting it to read it from Active Directory, is it published in Active Directory properly?
Yeah, or the DNS, the
Yeah.
DNS to check the DNS.
DNS is for management point, remember, not for site assignment. DNS is for management point when it's selecting a management point, not for site assignment.
Yes.
Yeah, and then for site assignment, do you have a boundary? Is it created? Do you have a boundary for that remote site created in your config manager infrastructure? Because if you're going to be expecting it to do that, you have to have a boundary that represents that. Otherwise, except you configure a default site, it's not going to assign itself to a site. So you have to have a boundary specified here. So the boundary that's specified here must match the IP address that site is coming from, because that is how it knows, because it's boundary group that it's going to use to automatically assign itself to a site. Use this boundary group for site assignment. Or if the boundary group is not specifically configured in here in config manager, then you have to go on the site here and you have to make sure that you have a default site configured. So under hierarchy settings, you have to say use a fallback site. So in other words, any machine that doesn't match any boundary group but needs to be assigned to a site, they're going to go, which site do I assign myself to? So you have to make sure that you've enabled use a fallback site. So any machine that maybe for some reason you forgot to create Active Directory site and services subnets for them, and they're not in config manager boundary groups, they will still assign themselves to a default site. So you have to check all that.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah. So I think that's probably it for today. And then the other one, the MP queries database for the new policy. Database returns the new policy to the management point. The MP sends the policy to the client. So again, let me send this. So I'll post it on the community page also. So some really good TechNet articles on this, because the place where this ones will be helpful for us is when things are not going well. So because once you can map out, so rather than doing things randomly, once we're able to map out step by step what's going on. So it does step A first, then step B, then step C, then step D, and then you can confirm, which one of these steps broke. And that will make your troubleshooting much easier, because now you have a clue of exactly what's going on in the backend. So now, for example, if you're having so this one is not for the one for site assignment or management point, but the same principle applies. So this one is for you're creating policies, you're pushing policies out to client. You've created a policy, you've said client should refresh their policy every 5 minutes. But for some reason, this particular client has not refreshed his policy. Yeah, thanks for that, Andrew. So let me post that in the book. So Andrew said some free books from Microsoft. So if let me post that in the chat window also. So if certain clients have not applied this policy that you specifically configured, you're like, hold on, but I configured this policy to say evaluate this compliance baseline, but this client for some reason is not getting this policy. What's going on? Then you have to go step by step and find out. So on the client, is it downloading any latest configuration, any latest policy from the management point? So check the policy agent.log. Check if it's downloading, if it's seeing any new policy. So if you do a new policy, what does it see? Does it say there's a 0 policy assignment for me? Or does it say there's 1 policy assignment for me? In which case, if there's 1 policy assignment for me, policy evaluator, am I downloading that policy? That's policy evaluator, and on the management point, mppolicy.log. Am I downloading this? So basically it's just going through all this step by step. Just going through all this step by step. And then once you can map it out from step 1 to step 2 to step 3, and you know which log to look at for each step, it makes troubleshooting much more easier than if we're doing things randomly. Any questions for what we've mentioned or talked about today? Any other questions? Another question. I'm not sure if we actually do. Yeah, excellent. Yeah, so that's true. So
the troubleshooting configuration manager.
Yeah.
That has a section there, and it goes through the workflows, pretty similar to the way you were explaining today, and it's quite a good resource actually.
Yeah, I agree. 100%. This one. So Abdul, that's the link. So that's the link that Andrew sent. So the book is Field Experience Troubleshooting Configuration Manager. So it's a free book from Microsoft, but it's a really good book.
There's 2 of them. Sorry, the first one is the Field Experience book, and the second one is the Troubleshooting Configuration Manager.
Yeah. So so if I go there.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff on that page.
Yeah. Configuration Manager. Yep, this is okay. Software update management. So yeah, I've read this one. This is a really good one.
The next one down. Keep going.
Troubleshooting Configuration Manager. Good one.
After one.
Yeah. And then Configuration Manager Field Experience. Yeah. So
Another one.
So Abdul, I'm not sure the particular video where we discussed it, but look for the video where we discussed site assignment and management point, and yeah, I'm sure it will help you in terms of troubleshooting that. So again, just map it down. So just try to track it down one by one. Just write it down. Step 1, this is what happened. Step 2, this is what happened. Step 3, this is what happened, and then map out which logs you have to look at in each step.
Okay.
Yeah. And then so basically if anything comes in, just follow through that, and even that way it even becomes much better for you in case, like what Andrew said, in case you need to automate even fixes later at some point. Let's say you're using something like Scrum or whatever, and you want to orchestrate or you want to automate some type of fixes if something breaks. Once you know this step is to check this step, to check this step, to check this step, and then check this step. It makes it easier whenever you're troubleshooting anything. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So no problem. So I'm not sure if I think this may probably be the last one for this year till mid next year. But yeah, I'll let you know if I'll have the chance for next week, because I'll be traveling next week.
You're not doing any on Christmas Day?
What? What's that?
I said no hangouts on Christmas Day.
No, absolutely not. I don't know. I'm even going. I'm traveling from next week. Just going to go to rest. Yeah. So, but yeah. So if nothing again for the rest of the year, I'm sure next year we'll pick it up somewhere, and then carry on from there. I'm actually. Does anyone? Okay, I've asked this before, but I want to take the exam, but I don't want to. I want to, but at the same time, I don't want to, because I don't want to take the exam now and then to release the 2016 version of the exam, and then I have to.
You mean SCCM?
Yeah, if SCCM, yeah, exactly. Even for people that are doing MCSA, I'm like, we'll probably know that next year they will come out with a new exam. That maybe just carry on studying and then prepare to take the new exam once it comes out. Not sure. Yeah. Yeah, I'm not sure, but yeah, we'll see. But once they come out with a new exam, I'm sure that I will go for the training and then we'll start MCSA all over again. That's our life as IT professionals. We just go on and on and on. And then we'll start MCSA again for 2016. And then after that, maybe 2018, we'll start again. Yeah. Exactly. Okay, no problem, man. Have a wonderful evening, guys. I'll speak to you next time. Yeah.
Excellent.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thanks very much. No problem.
Thank you.
Thanks. Yeah. Bye for now.